Mail time. I got mail. Let's look at some mail. If you have any questions about photo tips or whatever, send them to me. I'd be glad to help out. Now, this is from Dale in Texas. Dear John, I'm recently divorced and wondering if you have any tips on easing into the dating game. Not really about photography here, but life experiences and all. I mean, getting back into the dating game, no easy thing. It reminds me of a doctor that I was seeing, and well, by doctor I mean therapist, and by seeing I mean therapy. Okay, let's see if this one's more photography driven here. This is from Seamus in Arkansas. Dear John, congratulations on the birth of your new giraffe. Maybe not for me here. I don't have a giraffe. I've been following the whole thing on Facebook. My question, I bought a giraffe on the black market a year ago and I've been trying to get her pregnant with no success. Do you have any advice to share? Like, should I use a male giraffe? I really do need to screen these before we go live. One more. Maybe, just maybe, this will be about photography. Let's see what we got here. It's from Paula in Indiana. Dear John, hi Paula. Thank you so much for your program. I watch it all the time on YouTube. I learn a lot. Excellent. Keep watching. It will be a big help for when I start law school this fall. Do you have any Netflix recommendations? Paula, yes I do. Let's giraffes. Fade to black. Cue music. About that Netflix recommendation. Earlier this year, they had released an original documentary series called Abstract: The Art of Design. If you happen to work in the commercial creative industry, it is definitely a must-see. Don't have Netflix? Get Netflix. Check it out. It does have a broad appeal though. Each episode follows around a different artist in their own respective field. Anything from a car designer, a stage and set designer, to a shoe designer. Of course, my draw was a photographer. Abstract: The Art of Design. It's not a bunch of gallery portfolio fluff. It's about people and artists and creatives and their stories, their inspiration, which ultimately leads to their vision.
It's design.
Have you met Platon? I'd like to introduce you to Platon, featured in one of these documentary episodes. He's a photographer, obviously, and we're looking through his tear sheets at his website, and as you can see, he's famous for photographing a lot of world leaders and dignitaries. And the one I'd like to focus on is this portrait of Bill Clinton from 2000, commissioned by Esquire magazine. As a photographer, it jumps out at me plain as day. What Platon is doing is breaking one of the cardinal sins of portrait photography, and that is using a wide-angle lens on a portrait. No, quit, stop, don't do that. It messes things up, it skews the proportion and the perspective. Don't question it here. Platon knows what he's doing. He knows the rule, he knows he's breaking it. He's doing it with purpose though. He has a vision. And a lot of that vision comes from his childhood, growing up in Greece.
There were churches everywhere in Greece. In that church, you're going to have a singular, simple portrait of a religious figure. And it's just head and shoulders, and there's probably a halo. That graphic simplicity taps in all my design ideas, all the things I'm drawn to.
Graphic simplicity. Artwork from the Middle Ages inspires Platon. Let's face it, art, mosaics, paintings from the Middle Ages, not really that great artistically or aesthetically. I mean, proportions, perspectives, dimensions were always way off. Flat, centered, just not that good. Now it helps to understand, though, the iconography of the day during the Middle Ages was less about art for art's sake. It's more about storytelling. Think of it as a comic strip in single panel form. Books were rare. Illiteracy was the norm. Storytelling. Just not as funny as Marmaduke. Okay, for the sake of brevity here, I'm really not being very fair with art history. Now, the thing to really understand, though, about artwork in the Middle Ages is that we didn't attempt to get proportions and perspectives correct. I mean, back in the day, heads were small, hands were big, waistlines were high, distant backgrounds completely non-existent. Centuries later, during the Renaissance era of art, painters such as Raphael, Leonardo, and Michelangelo, they'll change all of that. Now, about the year 1500, we're talking the beginning of the Renaissance era. Raphael, most famous for all of his paintings of Madonna and Child. Now we go backwards in time, about 1300. This is about the tail end of the Middle Ages. We've got Duccio, his painting of Madonna and Child. The proportions are wrong. Totally, completely unintentionally. Just maybe it is as funny as Marmaduke. I mean, is that baby Jesus with male pattern baldness? So let's fast forward to 2000 now. That portrait of Clinton for Esquire magazine. It's not necessarily an example of graphic simplicity. Here, Platon takes advantage of the wide-angle lens. He is going for something that he refers to himself as larger than life. Portions and perspective skewed, but very intentionally. There's obviously a lot more going on here than mere lens selection. I mean, Platon is a pro. He's experienced and he's extremely gifted. But what else is going on here behind the scenes is Platon has a way of really connecting with the subjects. He does his research. He's not intimidated, and yet he's very respectful. And he knows what picture he wants to make. What can we take away from all of this? Distortion is bad, especially when it is unintentional. Guitar amp distortion, for instance, it's bad unless it's intentional. Same thing with wide-angle lens distortion. As photographers, we can use that understanding of these rules and reverse it, just as Platon does. Don't go nuts with a wide-angle lens on a portrait session. There's a time and a place, and it is rare. But experiment with it, play with it, have fun. We don't have to go nuts with a wide-angle lens doing a portrait session. In fact, we really shouldn't. So let's do a little demonstration here with Charles Hackley and a wide-angle lens. So that image of President Clinton, Platon was shooting with a medium format camera, so his version of a wide-angle lens is different than a wide-angle lens on this, a full-frame censored 35mm camera. On a medium format, Platon is going to be a little further back, a little more respectful in this regard. If you're shooting with a micro 4/3, you're going to be a lot closer yet. Yeah, so I don't really have a reference, not being able to look at that Platon Clinton photo right now. I gotta tell you, I'm not even gonna show you this because it almost looks vulgar. So because of the distortion we get from a wide-angle lens, there is a certain caricature-like element to photographing, especially way up close. Again, not something you want to do on a serious portrait, but it can be fun. What I recommend, because of the way we're shooting, is to find your focus spot and set it to manual. So I am just going to focus on the eyeball here. I know I'm going to be shooting from there. Set it to manual focus. And there we have it. Do you want to see? We don't need to know card tricks, but as photographers, why not? Let's call ourselves illusionists. That's how that's done. With Charles Hackley, I am John Jacobson with Picture Michigan, and keep pulling that trigger. Stay tuned after the credits. Let's learn more about Platon. So yeah, something new that we're doing here at the end of each episode after end credits is I want to lead you to another video to watch. This one is going to be Platon himself, and he is addressing some of the guys over at Wired magazine, and he's got some great, phenomenal stories, including the story behind that President Clinton image. Also, in a future episode, we're going to have to talk more about this wide-angle lens distortion, because as I was doing some fact-checking, a little bit of research, I was noticing there is a lot of misinformation out there about wide-angle lens distortion. What I'm calling wide-angle lens distortion is really more of a perceived distortion, and people are calling barrel distortion, which is a different phenomenon. They're calling that wide-angle lens distortion. That is totally wrong. I think one person wrote an article and then a gajillion people copied it. I don't know how that happens. It's the internet. You think that stuff wouldn't happen, right? We'll have to save that for another episode, because our next episode, and the next few episodes, will be at the Muskegon Museum of Art, and we're going to check out the Edward Curtis exhibition that's going on there all summer long, and an incredible exhibition about the 20-volume set of books called The North American Indian. You'll want to stay tuned for those episodes. In fact, you know, if you live in the Midwest and the timing's right, come on out and check out this exhibition. This lighting is incredible, and it's not because of these guys. We come to the beach to look at a sunset and we leave our headlights on. Look at that freaking beautiful sunset. Now, if you're shooting with a crop sensor, it's going to make a world of difference. The reason being is with a full frame wide angle lens, we're going to do 24 millimeters here. I am this close to Mr. Hackley. If you're shooting with a micro four thirds camera, you're going to be in here. And to duplicate that, you're probably going to be shooting with a real 12 millimeter with an equivalent 24, but that's long and boring. Holy shit. So, just between you and me, what do you think? Pigeons. I hear them too. We don't have pigeons here in this city, though. We have seagulls. Rats with wings. They're the frickin' rodents. I can sympathize with you. Top of your head looks like the top of my car some days.